Book 22, where we finally arrive at the moment where Hector meets Achilles. Can no longer avoid his fate, and the two duel. Chapman's Homer. The argument. All Trojans housed but Hector. Only he keeps field, and none goes the extremity. Achilles assaulting Hector flies, Minerva stays him, he resists, and dies. Achilles to his chariot doth enforce, and to the naval station drags his course. Hector in high to death is done by power of Peleus' angry son. Thus chased like hinds, the Ilians took time to drink and eat, and to refresh them, getting off the mingled dust and sweat, and good strong rampires on instead. The Greeks then cast their shields aloft their shoulders, and now fate their near invasion yields of those tough walls a deadly hand, compelling Hector's stay. Before Troy at the Scaean ports, Achilles still made way. At Phoebus, who his bright head turned and asked, Why Peleus' son pursuest thou, being a man, God, thy rage hath never done? Acknowledge not thine eyes my state, esteems my mind no more thy honour in the chase of Troy, but puts my chase before, their utter conquest. They are all now housed in Ilion, while thou hunt'st me. What wishest thou? My blood will never run on thy proud javelin. It is thou, replied Achilles, that putt'st dishonour thus on me, thou worst of deities. Thou turn'st me from the walls, whose ports have never entertained numbers now entered, over whom thy saying hand hath reigned, and robbed my honour, and all is, since all thy actions stand, past fear of reckoning. But held I the measure in my hand, it should afford thee dear bought scapes. Thus with elated spirits, steed-like, that at Olympus' games wears garlands for his merits, and rattles home his chariot, extending all his pride, Achilles so parts with the god. When aged Priam spied the great Greek come, sphered round with beams, and showing as if the star, surnamed Orion's hound, that springs in autumn and sends far his radiance through a world of stars, of all whose beams his own cast greatest splendour, the midnight that renders them most shown, then being their foil, and on their points cure passing fevers then, come, shaking down into the joints of miserable men. As this were fallen to earth, and shot along a field, his rays now toward Priam there, when he saw in great Achilles, out flew his tender voice and shrieks, and with raised hands he smit his reverend head, then up to heaven he cast them out, showing it with plagues it sent them, down again he threw them to his son, to make him shun. He now stood up, steep Ilion, thirsting combat, and to him miserably cried, the kind old king, O Hector, fly this man, this homicide, that straight will destroy thee. He's too strong, and would to heaven he were as strong in heaven love as in mine. Vultures and dogs should tear his prostrate carcass, all my woes quenched with his bloody spirits. He has robbed me of many sons, and worthy in their merits sold to far islands. Two of them, I miss but now. They are not entered, nor stay here. Lautho, O 'twas thou, O queen of women, from whose womb they breathed. O did the tents detain them only brass and gold would purchase safe events to their sad durance. 'Tis within old Altes young and fame gave plenty to his daughter's dow. But if they fed the flame of this man's fury, woe is me, woe to my wretched queen. But in our state's woe, their two deaths will not at all be seen, so thy life quit them. Take the town, retire, dear son, and save Troy's husbands and their wives, nor give thine own life to the grave for this man's glory. Pity me, wretch, so long alive, whom in the door of age Jove keeps, that so he may deprive my being in fortune's utmost curse, to see the blackest thread of this life's miseries, my sons slain, my daughters ravished, their resting chambers sacked, their babes torn from them on their knees, pleading for mercy, themselves dragged to Grecian slaveries, and all this drawn through my red eyes, Then last of all kneel I, alone, all helpless at my gates, before my enemy, that ruthless gives me to my dogs all the deformity of age discovered, and all this thy death sought wilfully will pour on me. Fair young man, at all parts it beseems, being bravely slain, to lie all gashed, and wear the worst extremes. Of war's most cruelty, no wound, of whatsoever ruth, but is his ornament. But I, a man so far from youth, white head, white bearded, wrinkled, pinned, all shames must show the eye. Live, prevent this then, this most shame of all man's misery. Thus wept the old king, and tore off his white hair. Yet all these retired not Hector. Hecuba then fell upon her knees, stripped naked her bosom, showed her breast, and bade him reverence them. Pity her. If ever she had quieted his exclaim, he would cease hers, and take the town, not tempting the rude field, when all had left it. Think, said she, I gave thee life to yield my life recomfort. Thy rich wife shall no rights of thee, nor do thee rights or tears shall pay thy course no obsequy. Being ravished from us, Grecian dogs nourished with what I nursed. Thus wept both these, and to his ruth proposed the utmost worst of what could chance them, yet he stayed, and now drew deadly near mighty Achilles, yet he still kept deadly station there. Look how a dragon, when she sees a traveller bent upon her breeding den, her bosom fed with full contagion, gathers her forces, sits him firm, and at his nearest pace wraps all her cavern in her folds, and thrusts a horrid face out at his entry. Hector so with unextinguished spirit stood great Achilles, stirred no foot, but at the prominent turret bent to his bright shield, and resolved to bear fallen heaven on it. Yet all this resolute abode did not so truly fit his free election, but he felt a much more galling spur to the performance, with conceit of what he should incur, entering like others for this cause, to which he thus gave way. O me, if I shall take the town, Polydamas will lay this flight and all this death on me, who counselled me to lead my powers to Troy this last black night, when so I saw make head incensed Achilles. I yet stayed, though, past all doubt, that course had much more profited than mine, which, being by so much worse, has come to all our flight and death. My folly now I fear hath bred this scandal. All our town now burns my ominous ear with whispering. Hector's self-conceit hath cast away his host. And this true, this extremity that I rely on most is best for me, stay and retire with a man's life, or die here for our city with renown, since all else fled but I. Yet one way cuts both these ways. What if I hang my shield, helm and lance here on these walls, and meet in humble field renowned Achilles, offering him Helen and all the wealth, whatever in his hollow keels before Alexander's stealth, for both the Atreides. For the rest, whatever is possessed in all the city, known or hid by oath, shall be confessed of all our citizens, of which one half the Greeks shall have, one half themselves. But why, loved soul, would these suggestions save thy state still in me? I'll not sue, nor would he grant, but I, mine arms cast off, should be assured a woman's death to die. The men of oak and rock, no words, virgins and youths talk thus. Virgins and youths that love and woo, there's other war with us. What blows and conflicts urge, we cry hates and defiances. And with the garlands these trees bear, try which hand Jove will bless. These thoughts employed his stay, and now Achilles comes, now near. His Mars-like presence terribly came, brandishing his spear. His right arm shook it. His bright arms like day came glittering on, like firelight, or the light of heaven shot from rising sun. This sight outwrought discourse. Cold fear shook Hector from his stand. No more stay now, all ports were left. He fled in fear the hand of the fear master, who hawk-like air's swiftest passenger, that holds a timorous dove in chase. And with command doth bear his fiery onset, that dove hastes, the hawk comes whizzing on. This way and that he turns the winds and cuffs the pigeon. until he truss it. His great spirit lays hot charge on his wing, so urged Achilles. Hector's flight, so still fear's point did sting his troubled spirit, his knees wrought hard, along the wall he flew, in that fair chariot way that runs beneath the tower of view. And Troy's willed fig tree, till they reached where those two mother springs of deep Scamander poured abroad their silver murmurings. One warm and casts out fumes as fire, the other cold as snow, or hail dissolved. And when the sun made ardent summer glow, their waters concrete crystals shined, near which were cisterns made, all paved and clear, where Trojan wives and their fair daughters had laundry for their fine linen weeds in times of cleanly peace, before the Grecians brought their siege. These captains noted these, one flying, the other in pursuit. A strong man flew before, a stronger followed behind him by far. Close up to him bore. Both did their best, for neither now ran for a sacrifice, or for the sacrifice's hide, or runner's usual prize. These ran for tame horse Hector's soul, and as two running steeds backed in some set race for a game that tries their swiftest speeds, a tripod or a woman given for some man's funerals. Such speed made these men, and on foot thrice about the walls. Gods beheld them, and all much moved, and Jove said, "Oh, ill sight, ill sight. A man I love much I see forced in that most unworthy fight. About great Iliad my heart grieves, he paid so many vows, with ties of sacrificed beeves, both on the lofty brows of Ida and in Ilion's height. Consult we, shall we free his life from death, or give it now to Achilles' victory?" Minerva answered, "Alter fate, one long since marked for death. Now take from death, do thou, but know he still shall run beneath our other censures." "Be it then," replied the Thunderer. "My love Tritonia, at thy will, in this I will prefer thy free intention. Work it all." Then stooped she from the sky to this great combat. Peleus' son pursued, incessant lies, still flying Hector, as a hound that having roused a hart, although he tappish ne'er so oft in every shrubby part, attempts for strength and trembles in, the hound doth still pursue, so close that not a foot he fails, but hunts at still at view. So plied Achilles Hector's steps, as oft as he essayed the pardoned ports and towers for strength, to fetch from thence some aid with winged shafts, and so oft forced he amends of pace and stepped twixt him and all his hopes, and still upon the field he kept his utmost turnings to the town, and yet as in a dream one thinks he gives another chase, when such a feigned extreme possesseth both, that he in chase the chaser cannot fly, nor can the chaser get to hand his flying enemy. So nor Achilles' chase could reach the flight of Hector's pace, nor Hector's flight enlarge itself of swift Achilles' chase. But how chanced this? How all this time could Hector bear the knees of fierce Achilles with his own, and keep off destinies? If Phoebus for his last and best through all the course had failed to add his succors to his nerves, and as his foe assailed, near and within him fed his scape, Achilles yet well knew his knees would fetch him, and gave signs to some friends making show of shooting at him, to forbear lest they detracted so from his full glory in first wounds, and in the overthrow make his hand last. But when they reached the fourth time, the two haunts, then Jove his golden scales weighed up and tucked the last accounts of fate for Hector, putting in him for Peleus' son two fates of bitter death, of which high heaven received one, the other hell. So low declined the light of Hector's life. Then Phoebus left him when war's queen came to resolve the strife, and in others' knowledge. "Now," said she, "Jove loved the Achilles. I hope at last to make renown, perform a brave access to all Grecians. We shall now lay low this champion's height, though never so insatiate was his great heart of flight. Nor must he scape our pursuit. Still, though at the feet of Jove Apollo bows unto a sphere, soliciting more love to his most favored. Breathe thee then, Stand firm, myself will haste and hearten Hector to change blows. She went, and he stood fast, leaned on his lance, and much was joyed that single strokes should try this raging conflict. Then came close the changed deity to Hector, like Deiphobus in shape and voice, and said, O brother, thou art much urged to be thus combated about our own walls. Let us stand and force to our retreat the insulting chaser. Hector joyed at this so kind deceit, and said, Good Deiphobus, thy love was most before of all my brothers dear to me, but now exceeding more it costs me honour that this urge thou comest to part the charge of my last fortunes. Other friends keep town and leave at large my racked endeavours. She replied, Good brother, it is most true. One after another, king and queen and all the friend did sue, even on their knees to stay me there. Such trembling shake from them all, this man's terror. My mind so grieved to see our war, girt with thy chases, that to death I long urged thy stay. Come, fight we, thirsty of his blood, no more let's fear to lay. Coursed on our lances, but approve, if bloodied with our spoils, can bear glory to their feet, or shut up all their toils in his one sufferance on thy lance. This deceit she led, and both come near, thus Hector spake, Thrice have I compassed this great town, Peleus' son, in flight with aversation, that out of fate put off my steps, that now all flight is flown. The short course set up, death or light, our resolutions yet must shun all rudeness, and the gods before our valour set for use of victory, and they being worthiest witness of all vows, since they keep vows best before their deities, let vows of fit respect pass both, when conquest hath bestowed her wreath on either. Here I vow no fury shall be showed. That is not manly on thy course, but having spoiled thy arms, resign thy person, which swear thou. These fair and temperate terms far fled Achilles, his brows bent, and out flew this reply. Hector, thou only pestilence in all mortality, to my seer spirits ne'er set this point twixt thee and me, any conditions, but as far as men and lions fly, all terms of covenant, lambs and wolves, in so far opposite state. Possible for love to tone, stand we to our souls satiate, God of soldiers. Do not dream that our disjunction can endure condition. Therefore now, all worth that fits a man, call to thee all particular parts that fit a soldier, and they all this includes, beside the skill and spirit of war, hunger for slaughter, and a hate that eats thy heart to eat thy foe's heart. This stirs, this supplies in death the killing heat. And all this needs thou. No more flight. Pallas Athenia will quickly cast thee to my lance. Now together draw. All griefs for vengeance, both in me and all my friends late dead, that bled thee raging with thy lance, this said. He brandished his long lance, and away it swung. Hector, giving view, stooped low, stood firm, foreseeing it best, and quite it overflew, fastening on earth. Athenia drew it, gave her friend, unseen of Hector. Hector then thus spake, Thou want'st thy end, godlike Achilles. Now I see thou hadst not learned my fate of all of Jove at all. High words would bravely intimate, much tongue affects thee, cunning words well serve thee, to prepare thy blows with threats, that mine might faint with want of spirit to dare. But my back never turns with breath, it was not born to bear burdens of wounds. Strike home before, drive at my breast thy spear, as mine at thine shall, and try then if heaven's will favour thee. Which scape of my lance, I would Jove would take it after me. Make thy bosom, take it all. An easy end would crown our difficult wars, while thy soul fled, thou most bane of our town. Thus flew his dart, and touched at the midst of his black shield, and flew a huge way from it, but his heart wrath entered with the view of that hard scape, and heavy thought struck through him when he spied his brother vanished and no lance beside left. Out he cried, Deiphobus, another lance. Lance nor Deiphobus stood near his call. And when his mind saw all things ominous, and thus suggested, Woe is me, the gods have called, and I must meet death here. Deiphobus, I well hoped, had been by with his white shield, but our strength walls shield him, and this deceit flows from Minerva. Now, O now, ill death comes no more flight, no more recovery. O Jove, this hath been otherwise. Thy bright son and thyselves have set the Greeks a greater prize of Hector's blood than now, of which, e'en jealous, you would care, but fate now conquers. I am hers. And yet she shall share in my renown that life is left to every noble spirit, and that some great deed shall beget that all lives shall inherit. Thus, forth his sword flew sharp and broad, and bore a deadly weight, with which he rushed in, and look how an eagle from her height stoops to the rapture of a lamb, or cuffs a timorous hare, so fell in Hector, and at him Achilles, his minds fair, was fierce and mighty, his shield cast a sun-like radiance, helm nodded, and his four plumes stood, and when he raised his lance, up Hesperus rose amongst the evening stars. His bright and sparkling eyes looked through the body of his foe, and sought through all that prize the next way to his thirsted life. Of all ways only one appeared to him, and that was where the unequal winding bone joins the shoulders and the neck had placed, and there they lay, its speeding way to death. And there his quick eye could display the place it sought, in through those arms his friend Patroclus wore when Hector slew him. There he aimed, and there his javelin tore stern passage quite through Hector's neck, yet missed it so his throat it gave him power to change some words, but down to earth it got his fainting body. Then triumphed divine Achilles. Hector, said he, thy heart supposed that in my friend's decease thy life was safe. My absent arm not cared for, fool. He left one at the fleet that betted him, and here it is that reft thy strong knees thus. And now the dogs and fowls and foulest use shall tear thee up, thy corse exposed to all Greeks' abuse. He fainting said, let me implore, even by thy knees and souls and thy great parents, do not see a cruelty so foul inflicted upon me. Brass and gold receive at any rate, and quit my person that the peers and ladies of our state may tomb it, and to sacred fire turn thy profane decrees. Dog, he replied, urge not my ruth, my parents' soul nor knees. I would to God that any rage would let me eat thee raw, sliced into pieces, so beyond the right of any law I taste thy merits, and believe it flies the force of man to rescue thy head from the dogs. Give all the gold they can, if 10 or 20 times so much as friends would rate thy price, what tendered here with voice of more to buy the cruel ties. I hear avowed, and after that thy father with his gold would free thyself, and all that should fail to let thy mother hold solemnities of death with thee, and do thee such a grace, to mourn thy whole course on a bed, which piecemeal I'll deface, with fowls and dogs. He dying said, I knowing thee well foresaw thy now tried tyranny, nor hope for any other law of nature or of nations, and that fear forced much more than death may flight, which never touched at Hector's foot before. Soul of iron informs thee, mark what vengeance the equal fates will give me of thee for this rage, when in the Scaean gates Phoebus and Paris meet with thee. Thus death's hand closed his eyes. His soul flying his fair limbs to hell, mourning his destinies, to part so with his youth and strength. Thus death, thus Thetis' son, his prophecy answered, die thou now, when my short thread is spun, I'll bear it as the will of Jove. This said, the brazen spear he drew, and stuck by then his arms that all embrued war, he spoiled his shoulders of. Then all Greeks ran into him to see his person and admired his terror-striking limb, yet none stood by that gave no wound to his so goodly form, when each to other said, O Jove, he is not in the storm. He came to fleet, in with his fire he handles now more soft. O friends, said stern Achilles, now that the gods have brought this man thus down, I'll freely say, he brought more bane to Greece than all his aiders. Try we then, thus armed at every piece, and girdle all Troy with our host, if now their hearts will leave their city clear, her clear stay slain, and all their lives receive, or hold yet, Hector being no more. But why use I a word of any act, but what concerns my fate, dead, undeplored, unsepultured, he lies at fleet, unthought on. Never hour shall make his dead state, while the quick enjoys me, and this power to move these movers. Though in hell men say that such as die, oblivion seetheth, you in hell, yet in hell in me shall memory hold all her forms still of my friend. Now, youths of Greece, to fleet, bear we this body, paeans sing, and all our glory navy to greet. With endless honour we shall have slain Hector, the period of all Troy's glory, to whose worth all vows, and vowed as to a god. This said, a work not worthy him he set to, of both feet. He bored the nerves, though from the heel to the ankle, and then knit both to his chariot with a thong of white leather, his head trailing the centre. Up he got to chariot, where he laid the arms he purchased, and scourged on his horse that freely flew. A whirlwind made of startled dust drave with them as they drew, with which were all his black brown curls knotted in heaps and filled. And there lay Troy's late gracious, by Jupiter exiled, to all disgrace in her own land, and by his parents seen, when, like her son's head, with all dust, Troy's miserable queen disdained her temples, plucking off her honoured hair, and tore her royal garments, shrieking out, in like kind Priam bore his sacred person like a wretch, never saw good day, broken with outcries. About both the people prostrate lay, held down with clamour all the town, veiled with a cloud of tears. Ilion with all his tops on fire, and all the massacres left for the Greeks, could put on looks of no more overthrow than now frayed life. And yet the king did all their looks outshow. The wretched people could not bear his sovereign wretchedness, plaguing himself so, thrusting out, praying all the press to open him the Dardan ports, and he alone might fetch his dearest son in, and all file with tumbling did beseech each man by name, and thus, friends, be you content, let me. Though much he grieve be that poor mean to our sad remedy, now in our wishes I will go and pray this impious man, author of horrors, making proof, if age's reverence can excite his pity. His own sire is old, like me, and yet I got him to our griefs. Perhaps may for my likeness be mean for our ruth to him. Alas, you have no cause for cares compared with me. I many sons, graced with their freshest years, have lost by him, and all their deaths in slaughter of this one afflicted man are doubled. This will bitterly set God, my soul, to hell. I would to heaven I could but hold him dead in these pinned arms, then tears on tears might fall till all were shed in common fortune. Now amazed their natural course doth stop, and prick a mad vein. Thus he mourned, and with him all brake ope their store of sorrows. The poor queen amongst the women wept, turned into anguish. My son, she cried out, why still kept patient of horrors is my life, with thine is vanished? My days thou glorifiedst, my nights wrung from some honoured deed done by thee virtue. Joy to me, profit to all I care. All made a god of thee, and thou madst them all that made they are. Now under fate, now dead. These two thus vented as they could their sorrow's furnace. Hector's wife, not having yet been told so much as of his stay without, she in her chamber close sat at her loom, with a piece of work, graced with both sides gloss, strewed curiously with varied flowers. Her pleasure was, her care, to heat a cauldron for her lord, and bathe him turn from war, of which she chief charge gave her maids. Poor dame, she little knew how much her cares lacked of his case, and now the clamour flew up to her turret. Then she shook Her work fell from her hand, and up she started, called her maids. She needs must understand that ominous outcry. Come, said she, I hear through all this cry my mother's voice. Shriek to my throat, my heart bounds ecstasy, utterly alters me. Some fate is near the hapless sons of fading Priam. What to God my words suspicions? No ear had heard yet. Oh, I fear that most heartily that some stratagem the son of Pelion hath put by the wall of Ilion, my lord, and trusty of his feet. Obtained the chase of him alone, and now the curious heat of his still desperate spirit is cooled. And let him never keep in guard of others, before all his violent foot must step. His place forfeited he held. Thus fury-like she went, to whom as she willed at hand, and made her quick ascent, up to the tower and press of men, her spirit in uproar. Round she cast her greedy eye, and saw her Hector slain, and bowed the Achilles' chariot manlessly dragged to the Grecian fleet. Black night struck through her, under her trance took away her feet, and back she shrunk with such a sway that off her head tire flew, her coronet, caul, ribbons, veil that golden Venus threw, on her white shoulders, that high day when the warlike Hector won her hand in nuptials in the court of King Eetion. That great dower then given with her, about her on her knees, her husband's sisters, brothers, wives, fell round, and by degrees recovered her. Then when again her respirations found free pass, her mind and spirit met, these thoughts her words did sound. O Hector, O me, cursed dame, both born beneath one fate, thou here, I in Cilician Thebes, where Placus doth elate his shady forehead in the court where King Eetion hapless begot unhappy me, which would he had not done to live past thee. Thou now art dived to Pluto's gloomy throne, sunk through one coverts of the earth, I in a hell of moan, left here thy widow, one poor babe born to unhappy both, whom thou leav'st helpless as he thee, he born to all the wrath of woe and labour. Lands left him will others seize upon. The orphan day of all friends helps robes every mother's son. An orphan all men suffer sad. His eyes stand still with tears. Need tries his father's friends and fails of all his favourers. If one the cup gives, 'tis not long the wine he finds in it, scarce moists his palate. If he chance to gain the grace to sit, surviving fathers, sons repine. Use contumelize, strike, bid, leave us, where's thy father's place? He weeping like, with dislike, retires to me, alas. Astyanax is he, born to these miseries, he that late fed on his father's knee. To whom all knees bowed, daintest fare opposed him, and when sleep lay on his temples, his cries stilled, his heart even laid in steep of all things precious, a soft bed, a carefulness's arms, tucked to him guardians, but now as huge a world of harms lies on his sufferance. Now thou wants thy father's hand to friend. O my Astyanax, O my lord, thy hand that did defend these gates of Ilion, these long walls by thy arm measured still, amply and only. Yet at fleet thy naked course must fill vile worms, when dogs are satiate, far from thy parents' care, far from those funeral ornaments that thy mind would prepare. So sudden being the chance of arms, ever expecting death, which task thou my heart would not serve to employ, my hands beneath, I made my women yet perform. Many and much in price were those integuments they wrought to adorn thy exquisite, which since thy flew, thy use, thy course not laid in their attire, thy sacrifice they shall be made, these hands in mischievous fire shall vent their vanities, and yet being consecrate to thee, they shall be kept for citizens, and their fair wives to see. Thus spake she weeping, all the dames endeavouring to cheer her desert state, fearing their own, wept with her tear for tear.